they eventually come to terms on a new deal? Or is there a legitimate shot that T.J. Watt could be on the move?
I think the most likely outcome in the end, by far, is that they reach an agreement with T.J. Watt and they find a way to keep him a Steeler for the rest of his career. That's, to me, the most likely outcome. But I just think it's worth noting that it's July 2nd or whatever today is, and he's not happy, and training camp starts in a few weeks here, and they haven't bridged any of their differences that have existed for weeks and months now. And so, look, I understand you go to training camp, that usually sometimes spurs things along, but I just think it's interesting this offseason that we've seen the Pittsburgh Steelers spend money on Darius Slay, on DK Metcalf, on Jalen Ramsey, on Jonnu Smith, and arguably the heart and soul of their team still hasn't been paid. And again, I think by far the most likely outcome is they'll figure it out. But they once said the same thing in Las Vegas about Khalil Mack going into training camp, and by Labor Day weekend he was traded. So again, I don't see that happening, but I'm just saying that he's not real happy right now, and the two sides are not close.
Now, when a name like this pops up, especially in a city like Philadelphia, there are Eagles fans everywhere saying the Eagles could get T.J. Watt. And we heard this with Myles Garrett, Jair Alexander. We've heard it with Trey Hendrickson. Is this team in any way in need of like a big star player like that, or do you get the sense that they're very well set where they're at?
I think they're well set, and as much as every team would love to have any of these players that you mentioned, the fact of the matter is I think the Eagles are planning and budgeting to pay their own players. And they're going to have any number of young stars, from Jalen Carter to the two cornerbacks that they drafted last year, to have to go pay in the future. They already paid Zach Bond. They paid Saquon Barkley. At some point, they're going to have to address the offensive side and, readdress those situations. So there's so many contractual situations and commitments that you have that it makes it hard all of a sudden to go trade for a T.J. Watt and pay him upwards of $30 million a year. Like, it just doesn't work. Yes, would you love to have him? Of course, every team would. But can you make it work feasibly, financially, structurally? And that would be incredibly challenging for the Eagles to do.
So I'm curious, Schefty, as the years go on, we always see the ebbs and flows in sports and how the leagues change maybe because of rules. Like, we're talking about the second apron in the NBA now, how hard it is to become a dynasty in the NBA, 7 straight years with different champions. In recent years, if you look at the past Super Bowl winners, Eagles, Chiefs a couple of times, the Rams, they've been doing it with young defenses and inexpensive defenses, and all the money is being thrown toward the offense, right? I know we're starting to see some Eagles players on defense get paid, and they're setting it up for the future. Is there a somewhat, not clear-cut way, but a certain way that teams have been trending toward trying to build their team to win a Super Bowl, quarterback aside, because we know that's number one?
Well, that is it in my mind. And I think after that, it takes on a lot of different forms and flavors. Yeah, the Chiefs have had some young players on defense. The Eagles have had some young players on defense. The Buccaneers, again, I know you want to dismiss the quarterback thing, but I just don't think it can be, because it's so central to what teams in the NFL are trying to do. And I mean, if you don't have that position solved, then you need an all-time defense to go in the Super Bowl. See, Brad Johnson and the Bucks, Trent Dilfer with the Ravens, to a much lesser extent, Jim Harbaugh and the Bears. So,
right, I'm not trying to dismiss the quarterback. The point I'm trying to make is, like, you see some teams like the Eagles, which I think the Eagles do it the right way. They build through the trenches, right? A lot of the money is on the offensive line, defensive line, where there are some teams that don't value it the same way. A team like the Bengals will put no money toward the defense and pay 2 wide receivers top money and their top quarterback. I don't know if there's a specific way in your conversations with GMs and executives that say, we believe this is the right way to build a team.
Well, I think every team is different. And the Bengals, paid 2 receivers, and they didn't do it until this offseason. It wasn't like they capitalized on it last year with their defense, because the defense was no good when they hadn't paid either wide receiver yet. So, I just think the goal, you could try to find meaning and hidden formulas in there, but I just think the deal is you need a great quarterback and you need to find a way to build a really strong team. However that's done. And there are any number of ways to do it. But I don't think there's one simple formulaic way that we just say, okay, this is what you do. You get the quarterback, you get young players in defense, and we're going to be set. Because that's not always the case. You need everything, and it comes from all different ways. And I just don't think there's a simple formula to it.
Schefter, speaking of finding the quarterback, the Steelers seem to have told us that they think they have a guy they can win with in Aaron Rodgers, even at this point in his career, because they're in this kind of weird go all in on this move. Jalen Ramsey going there now, and we'll talk more about that trade. But what is Pittsburgh doing? Do they believe they have a real shot with Rodgers?
Yeah, I think they do. I mean, I don't think that Mike Tomlin ever is willing to punt on a season, and they've been competitive every year. They've lost their last 6 playoff games. They haven't made any postseason music recently. But the fact of the matter is I think that they believe with the way they run the football, the way they play defense, if they get a quarterback to come in there, play smart, not make mistakes, that they're going to be okay. Now, again, I still think there's a question there. Aaron Rodgers still has to prove that he can play at a high level again. In return, he's going to be having a chip on his shoulder. A lot of people believe he's going to play well. But the guy is going to be 42 in December. And he's already thinking about the end of his career, too. And when players usually do that, a lot of times they have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. So we'll see how it works out, but I think they definitely believe they could win with Aaron Rodgers. I think they believe they have a Hall of Fame all-time quarterback, and let's see what he can do with that roster.
Speaking of postseason music, one guy that's made a lot of postseason music because he hasn't been in the postseason, there's your rim shot, Darren Waller. Explain to me what just went down yesterday where he comes out of retirement and the Dolphins make the trade for the soon-to-be 33-year-old tight end?
Yeah, well, Miami had a little bit of a hole. I don't think that all of a sudden trading for Darren Waller just solves that.
Right.
Like you lose a guy like Jonnu Smith and all of a sudden, let's bring in Darren Waller, a guy who's been injured, a guy who was out of football last year, a guy who had retired. And I think just generally speaking sometimes, guys retire and they are ready to make the transition into their next life. And I feel bad sometimes because it's not a simple transition to make.
Right.
And I think sometimes there are certain individuals that don't always realize that, oh, you don't just step into the real world and make $3 million, $5 million. Like they don't realize that that's very hard to do, and you're very privileged when you're doing that. And all of a sudden they step away and they get a taste of the real world. Like, you know what? Damn, I know it's a sacrifice. I know it's a physical toll, but man, I'd love to make that kind of money again that we can make in the NFL. And some guys want it badly enough that they go do it. Some guys miss the camaraderie enough. In Darren Waller's case, I don't know whether he missed the camaraderie, the money, both, whatever. But he felt like he had more to give.
So I think the last time we saw a move like that where a guy had his retirement announced and then the rights were still held was Rob Gronkowski going to the Buccaneers from the Patriots. Is this a more normal move than we think? Because when it popped up, Andrew and I were both like, wow, that's kind of wild that they brought him back from retirement and traded him, talking about the Darren Waller thing.
Well, what happens is when a guy wants to come out of retirement, a lot of times he does it with a specific site and team in mind. Same with Gronk. You know, when he came out of retirement, I don't know that he was coming out of retirement for 31 other NFL teams, but Tom was coming back to Tampa, Florida appealed, no tax state. Okay, yeah, let's go do this. Trade me there. I'll come out of retirement if you trade me there. And I think in the case of Darren Waller, I mean, I don't know this. Maybe he was living in the South Florida area. A lot of guys do. No tax state. Dolphins have a hole. And obviously that probably was part of all the discussions that Dolphins have been having in recent weeks because they knew that the possibility existed that Jonnu Smith was going to be traded. It had been out there that he could be traded. And sure enough, he was traded, and it created an opening that Darren Waller was happy to come out of retirement for. If yesterday the New York Jets, Buffalo Bills, New England Patriots had said we want Darren Waller. I don't know. Maybe he would have come out of retirement from one of those teams. But I have a feeling that he had a specific site in mind that he wanted to come back and play for.
Miami sounds nice. Shefty, get some water. Get that cough out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that midsummer the allergies. They've been bugging me with all the rain that we've been getting around here.
The weather is it's been crazy
insane.
All over the place.
Shefty, you're the man. We appreciate the time as always, and we'll talk to you next week.